Good Tuesday afternoon. It is August 21st and time for a hurricane update on Lane churning out in the Pacific. I talk about the Atlantic a little bit, but ghost town out there. Way too much sinking motion in the tropical Atlantic. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world where there's plenty of rising motion, we're having a lot of activity. Out in the Pacific Basin, we're on our 12th named system of the year and really much quieter than it was when Hector was around about 10 to 12 days ago. We had 4 systems at once. Now Lane stealing the show, a Category 4 major hurricane churning awfully close to the state of Hawaii as we get into the next couple of days. A very well-defined and textbook-looking major hurricane here. Well-defined eye, concentric eye wall here that's very symmetrical and showing a lot of thunderstorm activity with some gusty winds, of course, in it up to 150 to 185 miles per hour in some of those gusts. High-end Category 4 only needs 7 miles per hour more on those sustained winds to be considered a Category 5. Could it strengthen a little bit more and become a Category 5? Sure. It's got conditions that are favorable for it. Very warm ocean waters, a moist atmosphere, and low wind shear. And that should be the case for the next 48 hours or so. But as we look at water vapor imagery here, you can see the overall environment that Lane is sitting in, the moist atmosphere, the low wind shear, but it's not going to last forever. Off to the west here, we have wind shear coming in out of the south and west, and that is predicted to weaken Lane as it moves over that area and closer to the state of Hawaii as we get into Thursday morning and into Friday. So what does wind shear do? Well, with hurricane development, it's vertical development up towards the higher altitudes, correct, right? So the thunderstorm activity is building. When you have winds aloft, it displaces those thunderstorms away from the storm center and eventually weakening the system overall. So that disrupts the wind flow with stronger wind shear, and that's likely what will happen here as we go into the future. So some watches that are up currently for the state of Hawaii. Tropical storm watches for the Big Island right now. Good time to kind of refresh your memory on what a watch and a warning does mean. 48 hours in advance is typically when a watch is issued. Indicates the risk of some hazardous weather. And a warning is going to likely be replacing that watch here within the next 12 to 24 hours, about 36 hours in advance. Either the event is occurring, it's imminent, or certainly likely. Here's another look at how it looks on satellite imagery. The latest update here from the Hurricane Center out in Honolulu. It's now under the jurisdiction of the Central Pacific, based in Honolulu. And that's indicating that it has a small eye, about 15 nautical miles. So that's typical of very strong Category 4 hurricanes or greater. Also, 35 miles out from the center is where the hurricane force winds extend. That's 74 miles per hour or greater, and a little bit larger wind field than what we saw with Hector. Tropical storm force winds extend out 110 miles, and that's wind sustained at around 39 miles per hour or greater. A recent recon pass by the Hurricane Hunter aircraft found central pressure down into the 940s. Yesterday evening, it was in the 960s. After an eye wall replacement cycle occurred overnight, it has strengthened some, and some winds found there of 144 miles per hour within that most recent pass. Right now, it's clocked at 150 miles per hour sustained, gusts to 185. That's the advisory out of 11 a.m. this morning, putting it at a firm Category 4. Notice the track here does continue west for just a little while longer, then takes a hard right-hand turn and heads right towards the state of Hawaii before taking a left-hand turn and tracking back out towards the west, encountering that wind shear there coming in out of the southwest, meaning it does weaken down to a Category 2 or a Category 1. So what is steering Lane here? Well, for its lifetime as a tropical storm and a hurricane, it's been dominated by a ridge of high pressure that it's been south of. Now that it's been pushing off towards the west, another ridge of high pressure that's much weaker will break down, and this high will take over. So this will be the dominating steering event that'll push it off towards the north and then eventually out towards the west again. So depending on when it makes that hard right-hand turn will determine if the Big Island gets a direct hit or if it moves a little bit farther to the west. Here's how it pans out as we look at 2 different computer models. We'll start off here with the GFS, the American model, that says that it's going to take that turn a little bit sooner, so a little bit more dominant of that high pressure off to the west, off to the east of that system there. We'll take it almost directly over the Big Island. Now, with the very high topography here, the volcanic mountains, it does some weird things with the microscale environment. So watch what happens here. It hits that and then falls apart. It actually induces some wind shear thanks to the winds coming around the mountains there, and that could certainly disrupt the development of Lane, and that would be some good news for areas like Honolulu, just seeing some heavy rain and some gusty winds as Lane falls apart. Is that likely? Possible, but not definite. Here's how it looks on the European model. A little bit different. It says that that ridge of high pressure off to the east is a little bit weaker, so it's going to take some time to take that right-hand turn, possibly a little later. So that means it'll be just to the west of the big island and then track and be more of a problem for Honolulu with a lot of rain and still probably a Category 2, if not a major Category 3 hurricane at that point. Again, it's starting to encounter the southwesterly wind shear, which will start to tear it apart before once again it tracks off towards the west. It'll just be a remnant low at that point. But here's how it looks in terms of the other hurricane models. Again, about a 240 mile per hour, 240 mile spread in terms of the model agreement there. So nothing set in stone, certainly, but again, the majority have taken this more northerly trend out towards the big island of Hawaii and the other islands as you go back off towards the west. So certainly something to watch here as we go through the next 24 to 48 hours. In terms of the probabilities of seeing tropical storm force winds, yeah, they've been elevated, especially for areas like Honolulu, up to 70, 80, 90% chance of seeing those winds at 40 miles per hour or greater. Likely going to be some big impact, as well as high surf and flooding rains as this storm continues to churn off towards the north. So it's going to be a kind of a fluid situation here over the next 48 hours or so. We'll watch it. Find me on social media, meteorologist Tim Pandages, also on Twitter at 13 Tim Pandages, and also comment below if you have any questions on Lane as it tracks towards Hawaii.